Okay, we are being recorded. Let me get the presentation back up. Right, can you still see it?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Good. Right, let's begin. So everybody, welcome to the February edition of the WVD UK User Group. How many are we at now, Kirk? This is number 6, right?
I think it's 6 or 7, yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So the agenda for tonight, myself and Kirk, we're going to do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to do a what's new with WVD, which we do every month. Just give you a bit of the news about what's been happening over the last 4 weeks. So it's always quite busy because, as you know, WVD is constantly changing. And then we've got Jake Walsh with us. He's going to be telling you all about landing zones and enterprise scale considerations for Windows Virtual Desktop. So. And that'll be quite an interesting conversation. And then we've got Ryan Mangan, who's going to tell us all about Parallels RAS and how it can sort of help with your WVD deployments. So a few introductions. So my name is Neil McLaughlin, for those who haven't met me before or seen me present. I've been around for a while, over 20 years. I currently work at New Signature well, my new job title, New Signature, is a endpoint technical architect, but I'm actually leaving that job at the end of this month. So I'm going to be working for Nerdio as the UK field CTO. So really excited to get started there. So as you said, been around 20 years. Probably spent the past years completely focused on Citrix virtualization and VDI. And then sort of around a year ago, well, probably 18 months now, sort of made the jump into sort of focusing on Azure and Windows Virtual Desktop. I'm the co-founder of the WVD community, and also co-founder of the UK WVD User Group. I'm a Citrix CTA and also a Microsoft MVP, both of which I'm in my first year of being those. So that's been quite a busy, interesting experience. You can find me on Twitter at VirtualMank. As you probably guessed, that's because I'm from Manchester. And also you can find me at the WVD community Twitter page as well. And also there's my LinkedIn page. Over to you, Kirk.
Thanks, Neil. And hi, everyone. My name is Kurt Ryan. So yeah, I'm a principal technologist for Influence and Cloud Communities at NetApp. So I run a lot of the multi-cloud stuff that we do across all the big vendors, all the solutions you can think of, WVD being one of them. So as well, co-founded this group with Neil. You can usually find me either co-presenting or putting out YouTube videos on topics. I've got a very busy schedule ahead of microeducation, WVD included. So it'd be great to release those to this group first, which I'll probably aim to do next month, so you can see all those. And again, yeah, I got a heavy background in data, so you know I can take you right down into the ones and zeros of how data is stored, how to make it safe, secure, and how to make sure it's performant. You can find me on Twitter. There's my email as well, and then you can just catch me on LinkedIn or my YouTube. Just type in Kurt Ryan, and I pop up on there as well. So nice to meet everyone.
Thanks, Kirk. So I don't know how many of you have seen this before, but I'll run through it anyway. So this is just a bit of a history of how we got all started. So this user group is part of the wider WVD community. So we have these all throughout the world. We try to encourage people to set up local user groups if they want to. So if you are joining in from somewhere and you don't have a local user group, get in touch and we'll help you get set up. So we've got 13 worldwide at the moment. We've got a Twitter page. We have a website, wvdcommunity.com. We've also got a Slack channel as well, which seems to be growing. And we've also got a podcast, which actually reached just over 2,000 downloads this week. So that's getting quite popular. And also we do a weekly newsletter. So every Sunday we write a newsletter which contains all of the latest Windows Virtual Desktop news. So if you want to have a look at that, just go into wvdcommunity.com, go to the newsletter section and have a look at that. And then you can also sign up so you get notifications of when it's released and stuff. So it's quite a good resource. So the actual wider community is made up of myself, a guy called Stefan Digamonze. He runs the Dutch User Group, along with Baz van Kam, and also Patrick Kohler, who runs the German User Group as well. So that's who we are. So if you want to get involved with any of the wider WVD community stuff, please reach out to myself, Stefan or Patrick. So yeah, that's what we've got around the world at the moment. So as you say, we've got locations in UK, Holland, Germany, Belgium, everywhere. So if you are from those countries and you want to get in touch locally, just have a look at those. What can you expect from this meeting? So we meet once a month, which is normally the first Thursday of each month. We present the latest Windows Virtual Desktop news and everything around Windows Virtual Desktop. Obviously, we use Teams, as you know, because you're on this team meeting. We are recording this, so if there's anything you don't want the public to know about, or if you've got NDA content you want to discuss, let me know, and I can stop the recording so we can discuss that. So please don't let that stop you. And then hopefully we can have some physical events sometime, probably Q2, Q3, who knows. But I'm still to decide whether to do a physical event or whether we'll continue this virtual. I guess when the time comes, we can have a bit of a poll between people and see what they want. Maybe a hybrid, maybe meet once a quarter, physical, and then continue monthly virtual. Who knows? But we'll try and work something out. As I said, this is a community event, so if you've got something you want to share or you've got a presentation that you want to give, please get in touch with myself or Kirk and we'll schedule in. I think we've currently got slots available in April. I think we'll follow up for March. So from April onwards, if you want to present, you've got a subject. It doesn't have to be like half an hour, 45 minutes. It can be like, even if you just want to present for 15 minutes or 10 minutes or anything, that's fine. We fit around you. So if you've got something to present, let me know. And also we've got a Slack channel as well. So if you want to jump on the Slack channel, if you've got some problems with WVD or just want a discussion, jump on there. That's quite a busy Slack channel. Generally multiple posts a day about people having problems or anything. So normally we've got a few of the global black belts on there as well. So if you have any technical issues, I'm sure sometimes they can jump in and help you. So it's quite a good resource. So this month, so I've done a what's new slide. So this is basically just a roundup for what I put in the newsletter. As per usual, it's quite busy because things at WVD go at quite a fast pace. So first bit of news, the WVD Tech Fest event. So that's happening on the 25th of February. It's a full day's worth of events. There's multiple tracks running. So lots of speakers who you know, we've got a lot of them on this call today. So if you head over to wvdtechfest.com, there's a full lineup on there, which shows you all the sessions that are in there. I'm actually presenting a session along with Stefan Digamonze. It's actually the only non-technical one that we're going to present because we're going to be presenting together. So we're going to present in general career advice and community stuff and how to get ahead in your career and stuff like that. So that should be quite interesting. So yeah, head over to that website, sign up. It's completely free, so you'll learn a lot of great speakers, a lot of great interesting subjects to talk about. And other exciting news is Microsoft have currently got an offer on place. So if you're thinking about deploying WVD, which some of you may be, if you are a brand new customer to Windows Virtual Desktop, as in you never deployed it before, then you'll be eligible for this offer. So essentially what you get is you get 30% off the first 90 days, but only if you're using a B series or D series VM. So it's a great offer. So if you are even just thinking about it, sign up for it and have a play. Also shared this, might be quite interesting to some of you. So Login VSI, who obviously do load balance, it's not load testing essentially. They released their webinar where one of their employees, Blair Parkhill, he essentially did a WVD test with 500 sessions using their product. Quite interested to see the results, so I'm not going to tell you what they were, but head over to there. I think he's he saw some issues when he started to go beyond 320 sessions. But yeah, have a look at that. It's on YouTube, so interesting to watch. Defender for Endpoint is now fully supported on Windows Virtual Desktop. This one in preview, I think it was last month, up to 25 sessions per host. It's now gone into full GA, and you can have up to 50 sessions per host. Now, I believe that's just what has been tested, so it may go beyond more, but you won't be supported beyond that. So if you don't know what Defender for Endpoint is, it's the old sort of Defender for ATP. You need E5 license for that, which I've listed the licenses that you need. But if you're security conscious, or if you've got a project which you're working on which is security conscious, definitely take a look at that, because it sort of helps with increasing your security in your environment. And I thought I shared a slide as well. I was on a recent webinar with Microsoft. This is basically what's up and coming within the next 6 months with WVD. As you can see, you've got essentially quite a lot of stuff coming up. So we've got latency improvements coming up, so more locations, and we've got the metadata is coming. So you can store your metadata in more locations, which some companies require you to do for compliance reasons. They've also got increased compliance certifications coming up, which help with security. They've got also stuff that's going on with their, what's the other stuff that's going on? Yeah, start VM on Connect. That's a good thing. So that probably saves some money. So that enables you to keep your VMs shut down all the time for single user desktops. And then when the users try and connect to them, they'll just power on. So that will save you quite a lot of money if you have users who come in now and again or don't sit there for 8 hours a day. Azure Monitor enhancements, that's coming as well. So I'm not going to go through all these, there's loads of them. So that's a good one. There's that slide not going. And we've also got some new roadmap items that appeared on the roadmap. So we've got metadata locations coming for the UK, Australia, and Canada. So if you are in any of those locations, you should see some slightly improved performance. And also, if you need to do that for security reasons as well, because some companies, for compliance, won't let you store any data held within those regions. So if you're not aware, like the metadata stuff, it's essentially all the configuration information for your Windows Virtual Desktop. So when you set up a Windows Virtual Desktop in your tenant, it essentially writes all that information into a SQL database, I believe, and that's what's called your metadata. So that's held within those. I guess, think about it, probably make the solution a bit more resilient as well, because I know sort of end of last year there was an outage with all the stuff which had that metadata, so we won't have situations like that anymore, hopefully. And we've also got some new Microsoft Learn modules that have been released for Windows Virtual Desktop. So if you've not checked out Microsoft Learn, definitely have a look at that. They've got a whole raft of courses on WVD, so they're constantly added to them. So they've got one on securing Windows Desktop, and also deploying applications by MSAX and Attach. So if you want some free learning, and they are completely free, you don't have to pay for anything, definitely check those out. And we've also Nerdio for Manager MSP has been released as part of NerdioCon last week. So Nerdio for Manager MSP is a combination of two products. So Nerdio have two products, which is Nerdio Manager for Azure, which is general Azure stuff, and Nerdio Manager for WVD, which is obviously focused on Windows Virtual Desktop. So they've essentially combined all those products into one. Which means you can manage everything just from one product in your whole solution. So all your servers, your domain controllers, all that stuff, and they've brought all the features together as well. So all the awesome auto scale stuff that you had for WVD, you now get that for the rest of the infrastructure. So definitely check that out if you are a managed services provider or partner. Have a look at that. It's definitely worth checking. And we've also got Azure Security Baseline for Windows Virtual Desktop has been released. Again, if you are security focused, have a look at this. It's a very, very long document. It basically takes you through all the different security implementations that you can do for WVD. So have a look at that and try and basically use that in your environment if you can. One thing which I have noticed over the past few months, virtually everything which Microsoft have been releasing has been security focused. So it's good to see that, because I think one of the bits what WVD was missing was that security compliance. I think a lot of companies were a bit not eager to go to it, because obviously the competitors had a lot better security features. It looks like Microsoft are looking to fill that gap quite quickly, so that's definitely good to see. And we've also got a new exam which is coming up for Windows Virtual Desktop. So again, this shows how serious Microsoft are about Windows Virtual Desktop. So obviously they don't have that many exams for their products. So they've released one exactly for Windows Virtual Desktop. So it's called the AZ140. So they're hoping to release that in March. So if you do Windows Virtual Desktop deployments and you know a bit about WVD, I think you should definitely give that a try. I've put some links on there for some study guides. I actually started to put together something myself, a study guide, which will hopefully I'll be updating when I get time. I'm sure other people will be doing the same as well. But there's also a link that I've put on there to Travis Roberts' course on Udemy. He's actually going to again do the same thing. He's going to try and align his course, which is released, to all the requirements on the exam. Microsoft exams generally are quite open around how they map their documentation to the requirements that skills be measured. So definitely give that a try when it's released in March. I'm sure a lot of people on this call definitely we will be doing. And that is it from me. Are there any questions or anything about this week's news? Okay, let me just have a look. Okay, Jim. So, Jim's here answering stuff. Good. So Sean, will you put a link to the training in the chat window? Yeah, so basically what I'm going to do, these presentations, I'll be uploading them afterwards, but when Jake's doing his stuff, I'll get the chat window, put it in then. Is it beta or full release for the exam? I believe it's beta, because I've not actually seen the beta being released, so I presume it's beta, but don't quote me on that. Can we get recordings? Yes, these sessions have been recorded, so I upload them all to YouTube. So what I will normally do, I email them out all around. So if you miss anything or you need to drop off, it's not a problem. Security baseline scope. Yeah, sure, I will do when we're doing the next session. So has anybody else got any questions before Jake begins? Nope. Okay, Jake, over to you.
Thanks, Neil. Just present my screen. Cool. Is that coming through okay?
Yep, we can see that fine.
Cool, excellent, thank you. Right, so hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk about landing zones, why they're important, and also talk about some enterprise scale considerations for Windows Virtual Desktop. So just a quick intro to start with. Obviously, my name is Jake Walsh, currently a principal consultant at CDW UK. If you would like to connect with me, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I do have a website, blog occasionally as well. But yeah, feel free to connect on Twitter. That's the area I'm most active. Cool. So a quick overview of what we'll go through today. So an overview of landing zones. We'll cover off kind of why they're important, and just what they are. There's been a lot of talk about landing zones in the community recently, and I think it's just something that's worth touching on. They really can be quite useful for all all types of deployments on Microsoft Azure, but particularly for WVD, where we're thinking sort of growth and long term. They really do come into their own there as well. So we'll cover that off. And then really we're going to go into enterprise scale for WVD. So it's things like, what do we need to do if we're at position A now, but we want to get to position B in the future. You know, if our business doubles, you know, it's all those sorts of things. And I've got a few examples and areas I'll go through, and then I've got some useful resources which will be shared at the end on the presentation as well. So let's talk about landing zones. So if we take the definition from the Cloud Adoption Framework, so Azure landing zones are the output of a multi-subscription Azure environment that accounts for scale, security, governance, networking, and identity. But what do we actually mean by that? So I would liken a landing zone to kind of a foundation in a building project. You would pick your area. So I want to build a house on that piece of land over there. I would dig the foundations. I would get the drainage in place. I would get electricity into the area, water, gas, and obviously the most important thing, internet access. And the people who move into that building are a bit like the services or workloads that you would consume and run within Azure. So a landing zone is all about getting things in place for you to grow. So it's about getting a foundation for scalable and modular growth. And that's about getting the basics in place so you can consume those services. You know, and that's, if we take WVD as an example, that's all things around, you know, Azure Active Directory, Windows Active Directory, two examples of something that you may consider, you know, very strongly if you were looking to make a foundation for scalable and modular growth. Enterprise scale, that actually focuses on 8 common design areas, which I'll come on to in a second. And these are kind of the key areas that really do need consideration when you design with scale in mind. Usually landing zones are deployed through automation, but not always. So all organizations are different. You know, if you have a quick Google of landing zones, you'll find there's loads of different examples out there, community examples in the Cloud Adoption Framework that you can kind of draw on and use that to help yourself moving forward. So those 8 common design areas I mentioned are network topology and connectivity, identity, resource organization, governance disciplines, operations baseline, enterprise enrollment, deployment options, and business continuity and disaster recovery. So these, you know, when we're thinking about landing zones, in terms of all of these, things like network topology and connectivity, that can be questions around what's our topology going to look like? How will things be connected? You know, and when you consider a landing zone, the question you need to be asking is, what does it look like now, but what might it need to look like in the future? It's all about scale and growth. Identity as well, you know, when you're considering identity for a landing zone, that's again thinking about what are we doing at the moment and what do we want to be doing in the future. Resource organization, I mean, that goes without saying, really. You know, if you're going to grow, you have to be organized, and there are things we'll cover off to talk about how that's done and some of the practices you can apply as well. Governance disciplines, so this is all things like how do we stay compliant? You know, what are the international, legal, perhaps business sector specific baselines that we need to adhere to? You know, and just covering those important aspects really. Operations baseline is all about how we provide a baseline of operations for this environment. So what metrics are we going to use to say this is operating as we would expect? How are we going to get visibility into that environment? How are we going to make sure that the experience is good for our users, for example? Enterprise enrollment, well, that's all about, do we have a tenant in place? You know, what sort of subscription model will we use? How will we structure our subscriptions, and those kind of questions. Deployment options, so that's about how we'll actually deploy our resources, our landing zones, and any other services we want to consume moving forward. You know, and that could be, for example, right now we're just using the portal because we're running a few IaaS workloads, but in the future we want to move everything into Microsoft Azure and consume X, Y, and Z new services. So there's options there around that as well. And obviously everybody's favorite topic, business continuity and disaster recovery. You know, and for this area, it's questions around, you know, how we're going to architect for that and how we're going to plan for that long term. So let's take a quick look. So this is actually from the Cloud Adoption Framework. This is an example of the phrase I used earlier. So this is an example of the output of a multi-subscription Azure environment. So this is a fairly typical environment of a large organization. You know, this is clearly an organization with some scale behind it. I guess I just want to draw your attention to a few key things in here so you get the idea of how a landing zone is deployed. So perhaps the first thing that's quite obvious is the use of multiple subscriptions. Nested under management groups as well, just to keep things neat and organized. You know, that's one of the principles of the Cloud Adoption Framework as well. You'll notice as well in the center section, there's actually some landing zone areas marked, and those are kind of specific application workloads. So a place to deploy application X, another landing zone for application Y, for example. And taking it back to the concept of providing areas to grow and options for scale, that's exactly what's been done here. A subscription's been brought up to run workload X, Y, and Z, and we've put everything we need in there, connected it to the connectivity subscription, and you can see just using that as an example how that provides the room for growth. You can see there's a management subscription, identity subscription, and a connectivity subscription as well. So things are segmented under their various sort of business areas and management groups as well. You'll notice also there's actually a sandbox subscription. So any sort of development, testing workloads would run there. Yeah, and just taking this as a large example. Obviously, this is perhaps much larger than some environments would look, but you can just see how everything's been segmented so that it has a kind of logical structure and a structure that will work moving forward as that business grows or starts to consume and adopt more services. So this is another really important concept for landing zones. Time is really, really important. If you consider an organization perhaps at the today point in the landing zone, they're just starting to look at the process. How do we move some of our workloads to Azure? What services may we wish to consume? And obviously, as time progresses, they're potentially looking to consume more of those. So a landing zone is really, really important when it comes to consuming services over time. You need to account for things like business growth, acquisition, changes in structure, new services, future services as well. And kind of when you're designing a landing zone, all of those things become really important. So it's essentially about designing so that you can grow as a business. If we want to consume this service, what happens if we treble our user base? What happens if we expand to 10 different countries? And those are the kind of questions that a landing zone should be helping to answer for you. So why are landing zones important? So they're essential to get the right start in Azure. For some organizations, that means enterprise scale, a bit like the diagram we've just seen. For others, it means starting small and expanding, as their needs dictate. A landing zone as well is going to provide you with some foundational resources. So for example, I want to consume an application that has 3 front-end web servers and 2 back-end databases. Well, that's all well and good, but in the future, that application might be 20 front-end web servers and 50 databases with a team of 200 people working using DevOps to support it. It's all about how that growth will look for your business. And when you put a landing zone in, it needs to account for that. So it needs to give you the room to grow. It also helps to remove the age-old question that anybody will know from working in enterprise IT that, we need to have X in place before we can use Y. That's quite common for legacy environments. By ensuring that you have supporting elements in place, a landing zone helps you grow. For WVD, they're really important as well because it provides you with a baseline of resources. So then you can grow and scale as you need. And some of the things we'll come on to shortly, you'll really see just how certain elements within landing zones and those design areas really are important. When we talk about growth and scale, in some cases that means enterprise scale. When I say enterprise scale, this is something that's covered extensively in the cloud adoption framework. It's not covered specifically from a WVD angle. There are considerations in there, but I think it's taking those design areas. It's really quite useful for WVD, and you can kind of use those to help guide your journey, help you answer some of those questions, and sort of pose some of those scenarios to you that you may need to consider in the future. And in some cases, they may be things that you just weren't aware of potentially being a problem. So we've had a quick look at landing zones and just covered an overview of what they are. And we know that obviously they provide a foundation for scalable and modular growth using those common design areas. But what about scale and growth of Windows Virtual Desktop? So I think it's fair to say that WVD has unique scale implications. It's not just compute resource. When you say I want to double the number of users on this environment, or I want to deploy this to users in another region, it's not just compute that we're talking about here. The design areas are essential to consider when planning for worldwide or resilient rollouts. So, if you're looking to deploy across different regions, or, you want to, for example, have it so that failover occurs, we have a workload deployed in region X and we want it to run in region Y if there's a problem. These design areas really are important. So again, these are the common design areas. I won't read them all out because we're going to go through them all in some detail now. Just one thing to note, that the next few slides on these design areas, they're not an exhaustive list. There are obviously other things to consider. I've just tried to to highlight some of the common areas and things that you may need to consider, sort of based on mine and wider community experience. So yeah, it's just well worth looking at some of the resources I'm going to share at the end, and the cloud adoption framework if this is a journey you're going to be going on. So we'll start at the top: network topology and connectivity. So for Windows Virtual Desktop, the considerations are mainly around access and connectivity to other services. So backend applications, supporting services. But one of the key things you also need to account for is inter-region connectivity, and you also need to provide room for growth. So if you were taking a landing zone approach to this and looking to deploy, say, a virtual network with a number of subnets, a clear growth point there would be making sure that, for example, you had enough subnet space, ensuring that there was appropriate bandwidth. It's those kind of areas that you need to consider. Something else that's quite often overlooked as well is the impacts that Windows Virtual Desktop may have on any topology. Do we need to account for 200 additional IP addresses for some VDI machines or something like that? Have we considered how those machines will access our on-premises estate, for example, if we have an application that we need to gain access to that requires network access there? Backend applications is another really important point as well. You could have the world's best Windows Virtual Desktop deployment, completely resilient, lightning fast, super quick login, but if it can't access the applications that users need because of a network problem, then the response to it is not going to be that great either. Again, those legacy applications, if they are on premises, considerations there around connectivity and access methods, and perhaps the future suitability of those applications is something else to be considered as well. Firewalling and security, another really important point for Windows Virtual Desktop. Obviously, Neil's just touched on the security baseline that's come out. That's well worth a read for this kind of area. And you need to think here about organizational requirements. So if you're looking to consume Windows Virtual Desktop at scale, there are obviously going to be perhaps internal security requirements, internal frameworks, and those sorts of things. Web filtering is another common question here from clients. For example, we have an on-premises Citrix deployment. We're looking at WVD as an option, but we have a proxy server in our estate that filters everybody's web traffic. How do we deal with that? DNS as well. I have a t-shirt somewhere that says it's always DNS. DNS is really important with Windows Virtual Desktop. The endpoint that you're routed to, if you access the service, is based on the lookup source for DNS. So if you're hairpinning all of your users who are at home, for example, back into a corporate VPN and accessing from there, and somebody happens to travel or is accessing from a region that's geographically a long way away, chances are they're not going to get a great experience. So that's something else to be considered as well. User access and experience as well is really important for topology and connectivity. How and from where will your users access the environment? What devices are they going to use? Are they accessing somewhere where they're going to use a kiosk machine and need to use a browser? Are they working with applications that are going to use a virtual machine with a graphics card in, for example? Could RDP ShortPath, currently in preview, help with their experience in the future? Something that's really useful for just looking at the client experience is the experience estimator, just to give you an idea of what the latencies are like and where might be the best region for your resources. So let's take a look at identity as well. So with identity, obviously this is a key area as well, as are all of these areas. identity is quite literally the key to everything in any cloud computing environment. We need to secure this environment, otherwise we're not going to have a business. It's basically what it boils down to. Obviously, we need Azure Active Directory for Windows Virtual Desktop, first point of authentication for users coming in. Really here, the considerations need to be around multi-factor authentication, any conditional access requirements, and what your organization needs in terms of its security. And if that organization has any existing arrangements or conditions that need consideration, if you're trying to propose this as a solution, you need to make sure that solution can fit with what the organization needs in terms of security standards. So this is a really important consideration moving forward. Likewise, Windows Active Directory is really key for Windows Virtual Desktop as well. If you are looking at Windows Virtual Desktop at scale, having session hosts accessing Windows Active Directory over a VPN, for example, may not be the most appropriate choice. If that VPN goes down, you may have problems. And actually citing domain controllers in Azure, is probably going to be a better choice for you. But these are all the sorts of things you'll need to consider, for example, if you then look to expand that environment later on. Management access roles and permissions is an area that quite often gets overlooked as well. If you are going to scale out, perhaps you have a UK team looking after UK session hosts, but you might have a team in the USA looking after their session hosts. From an organizational perspective, you may need to consider if one group is really appropriate for that, or you need to look at splitting that down, perhaps management groups or subscriptions beneath, or just assigning permissions at various different levels. It's well worth in that case doing a sort of mapping exercise and drawing that out just to look at how that structure will work. Having that structure in place from the offset will save a lot of headaches later on, and certainly make it easier for just making sure that permissions are appropriate and not kind of too wide. Supporting services is really important as well. For example, do we have applications that we're looking to move to the cloud that will be used with Windows Virtual Desktop? Perhaps we're looking, at taking some line of business applications. If we're deploying those, are we considered what authentication identity requirements they have? Again, important here to consider growth. So, that application may have 200 users today. What happens if our business has a fantastic year and it grows to 2,000? How do those requirements change? And just drawing out some scenarios for things like that can be of assistance as well. Okay, let's have a look at resource organization. So, it goes without saying, really, organizing resources essential for ensuring optimal deployment and ongoing management of any service deployed in Microsoft Azure. The implications for organization go, beyond everyday management to growth to billing. It's all encompassing, really. When we're talking about organization, I guess subscriptions is a common question as well. So a subscription, a billing and management function. When working at scale, we might need to consider if this is geographic, business unit specific. For example, you saw in the diagram how the different business areas had subscriptions. So we had one for identity, we had a management one, we had a connectivity one. We then had some application specific landing zone subscriptions. That's a kind of question that only somebody in the organization can probably answer, that understands the kind of technologies and applications you're working with. But also there, it's really important to consider how those development and testing needs look. You may, for example, have a very, very stringent development and testing cycle that you want to isolate so you can prove that works perfectly before you roll it out to production, just as an example. Again, locations really important. Kind of that's the first question when you're organizing anything. Where are we going to run this? And obviously, with Windows Virtual Desktop, that's again a global question depending on how your users are located. Usually that's a case of providing a balance between user locations and wherever your application data or backends is hosted. In some cases as well, location becomes a multi-region question. So for example, we have users all across the globe, might mean that we have small pockets of resource all across the globe, or it might be we have all of our users in this location, so we're going to have a primary region and a disaster recovery region. All of those sorts of things are worth discussing. Again, that's important for business growth as well. If you're looking to scale out and grow, you may wish to consider additional locations to assist with that. Resource groups, again, this sounds like basic stuff, and it is. At the end of the day, it's grouping some resources together. But it's important just to consider, how you're going to use these with Windows Virtual Desktop. Are you going to group by location, function, region, business unit? This is another kind of good example of a question that can probably only be answered once you've spent some time looking at the options that will suit your business or the environment that you're designing for. Again, you may be already consuming Microsoft Azure at scale, and you may need to fit with that existing standard. So in that case, it might be, for example, arranging your resource group to fit with that existing standard. It's just something, again, that's worth spending some time on and looking at how it may change and how you'll fit into any existing strategies if they are there. Business areas, again, this is a common one I experience in my job. We have this business unit that has this number of users. That's one host pool. We have another business unit that's this users, and we don't want those to talk. For example, one unit might be a secure business unit that deals with one subset of data that the other absolutely cannot touch. That's another common question. So that's another one where mapping those out and looking at how that may actually work moving forward is really important as well. Again, thinking about future needs. So, map it out with what it looks like today and how it will need to look when you do the deployment, but also consider, for example, those two units, business units, may merge at some point, or they may split, or we may purchase a company and have to bring in one of their business units to that department. So that will need to grow by twice as many users. Again, these are all just small examples, but planning for that and accommodating that can really help in the future. Again, tags, great way to optimize resource management. You can tag on anything you want, person that looks after it, the key contact, the location, the criticality, sensitivity level. This is something where, we could talk for hours on all the different tagging options you could apply. But again, this is something, if your organization is already using it, consider how you'll fit into that and any changes that may need to be made, but also ensure that you've looked at how that will work moving forward. If, for example, we're tagging today with, a business unit and we put finance, what happens if the company expands and we then have a finance team in the UK and a finance team in America, for example? You may need to change that moving forward. So again, just something that's worth giving some consideration to. So governance disciplines, I've saved management groups for this slide, but it is worth pointing out that a management group, in theory, is a way to organize resources. They exist under a management group as well. So something to consider. But yeah, management groups do have their place. They're kind of more found in enterprise environments, but they're starting to to be seen more in all types of environments, really. Very, very useful when you need to arrange, for example, permissions delegation. So you might have a management group for US infrastructure, for UK infrastructure. You may wish to nest a management group underneath that for the Windows Virtual Desktop in each region. And you can use that to your advantage, just to make sure that you've got a point where you can get the right team, the right access. Again, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all for that. It's about what works for your organization. Just something, again, worth mapping out and thinking, well, actually at the moment we're just a UK company, but in the future we've got growth plans into these regions. Have them there, have them ready, map them out so you know exactly what needs to be put in place should you need that. The reason I've put specific security requirements in here as well, I think this is quite important. So you might, for example, be working with an organization that has some specific data sovereignty requirements. You may have a specific application that needs an installation on a machine that's been hardened in a certain way or can't access something. Those sorts of things need to be thought about as part of your governance disciplines. There's various ways you can achieve that. Azure policy, for example, blueprints can help too. You might want to design an environment and use a blueprint so it can be redeployed again to meet those standards. Azure policy, this is an essential part of all of the governance within Microsoft Azure. Taking the cloud adoption framework statement. So think of Azure policy. If you've got a path that doesn't have any fences on the side of it, Azure policy is those guardrails. So you're effectively placing guardrails for compliance standards. You can then allow, for example, perhaps regional teams around the world to deploy their resources and know that those resources are deployed in line with the compliance standard that you've defined in a policy. That's really important if you are going to grow. You may want to grow and you may want to grow quickly to the point where you've got lots of devolved teams doing their own you know, their own implementations and getting their own users on in their perhaps geographical regions. Well, having policy in place is a great way to ensure compliance, you know, and it really can help with that. Locks, again, yeah, self-explanatory, but a resource lock, you know, is kind of critical. Anything production needs to have a resource lock on it, protect those resources. Tagging as well, you know, I know we covered that in the last section. I think there's a little bit of crossover really between organisation and governance disciplines, but it can be a great help for governance as well. You might want to, you know, tag that this environment or this subset of your environment adheres to standard X, you know, so anybody quickly can go and filter and see all those resources that have to comply to that standard, and perhaps do an audit or you know, some sort of compliance checking or anything that they might need to do on that as well. Again, blueprints is important. You know, a blueprint is a way of designing a repeatable set of resources. Very, very useful for larger organizations. Perhaps you're going to have a blueprint that you then give to another team that might continue to deploy that. So they really can come into their own there as well. So let's talk about operations baseline as well. So monitoring is really, really important for any environment, not just Windows Virtual Desktop. You know, if you're monitoring an environment, you're taking a look at that environment, you're trying to understand how that environment is performing. You know, and that goes beyond just, you know, how much CPU are we consuming? You know, what's the storage like on these servers? It's about understanding how all of your various applications and workloads are actually functioning. In some cases for a business, that might be, you know, how fast are we serving these pages, these website pages to our customers? For Windows Virtual Desktop, it might be, well, you know, we're monitoring login times and we can see over the last month they've increased by, you know, 30 seconds. So let's look into our data to try and find out why that is, for example. In the case of Windows Virtual Desktop, obviously, pretty much endless possibility with Azure Monitor and log analytics. I think one of the things that's really key for Windows Virtual Desktop, particularly at scale, is to identify those key metrics. You know, when you actually work with dashboards in Azure, you can create very, very detailed dashboards to show you exactly what you need. The key really is in understanding the data that you need to see. There's some really good community dashboards that are in the links I'll include at the end, that, you know, that can help with that. And it's just worth considering. You know, you might want an overview dashboard that shows the health of the whole estate. You might then want a detailed dashboard for a specific host pool. Perhaps you've got a number of host pools for different business units. You might want a regional dashboard. And then perhaps, you know, you want to drill down into specific core applications, for example. Service health is another really easy one for an operations baseline. Interesting, the number of environments I see where this isn't set up. Very, very simple, very, very straightforward, but you get an email when there's a health issue with a service that you've selected. So quite important to get that set up. You know, if there's some sort of outage, it's better to be told about it rather than looking around trying to find out, you know, what's going on. If you know there's something wrong, it becomes much easier to deal with rather than trying to find the cause or, you know, do some root cause analysis of a problem. Ongoing optimization is really important as well for an operations baseline. So this is all about, you know, how are we going to optimize this environment if we've grown at scale? If we've grown from, you know, being used to having 100 session hosts that we do an update to, you know, once a month or once every 2 weeks, and we've now got 10,000, you know, our optimization plan and how we're going to work with that is really going to change. There are some third-party applications that can help with that as well, for things like image management or additional patching, additional technologies that can layer on top of Windows Virtual Desktop. It's just something that's worth, you know, giving some consideration to in terms of how that may look if you do grow. Again, patching, really important. So various methodologies for patching and managing session hosts long term. You know, you may look at automation. You may already have a tool set in place. Again, questions to be asking there are how will this work if it grows? What happens if we go from, you know, a monthly patch to a bi-weekly patch, for example? What happens if the team that writes our in-house application turns around and says we've got to deploy this, you know, 3 times a week instead of once a month? Those are the sort of questions to be asking, and also, you know, questions around how you will deal with things like growth. So, for example, the patching system might be suitable for 20 machines. What happens if that becomes 200 or 2,000? Again, everything about growth and scale. What happens if we become a 24/7 business and we need to do a patching system or patching schedule, that, for example, does a subset of machines at one time period in the day and another in another time period of the day, so there's no outage to our end users? Those are the kind of questions to be thinking about there. Again, application deployment as well. So, we need to deploy applications to end users. We need to consider how we're going to do that and what the impact growth will be. Back in the day when I first started doing VDI, I worked for an educational establishment. We had several hundred applications in a master image, which became very, very challenging. The number of updates just wasn't manageable. And again, if you grow and the number of applications you need to grow, that's going to become a really important question for you. So obviously, third-party tools can help. The MSIX application packaging that's just sort of coming out now and becoming more commonplace can really help as well. Shared image gallery as well can really help. You can have different versions of images. We can get those uploaded. We can get them rolled out to different places. Again, that's something just to consider. How those things may change over time for your organization. Enterprise enrollment. So obviously, this one is fairly straightforward, but we need an agreement in place to support our growth. Whether that's pay-as-you-go, CSP, enterprise agreement, whatever it may be, we need a way where we can consume Microsoft Azure. Subscriptions as well. I know we touched on this slightly earlier, but important to consider how they'll be structured to support and achieve scale. Considerations around, is that going to be business units, teams, departments? Are we going to have a subscription for development and test or regional units? Something that's really important to consider here is subscriptions do have limits as well. If you're looking to, for example, spin up a DR environment in a single subscription, and that's got 1,000 virtual machines that may need a reboot, you may be impacted by limitations as well. So it's worth just considering how those will be laid out and making sure that you're not going to hit any of those limits. The last thing you want is to unveil a big shiny new environment that's completely resilient and then find that if you try and spin it up, you encounter a limit. So I think I've included a link to the limits page for those later on, but that's just something that's really important to consider as well. Billing may sound like a strange one to include under enterprise enrollment, but obviously, if we're designing an environment, it's got to be suitable for our organization. We may have specific billing requirements, and we need to optimize our billing as well. It would be nice if we all had a credit card with no limit that we never had to pay off. Life would be pretty good then, but chances of that happening are fairly slim. So things like reserved instances, smart scaling, power management. I think also, here the 2020 test is important. What happens? Are we in a position where if we have to send 1,000 staff home, pretty much, in the space of a few days, do we have all the agreements, the subscriptions, the billing models to grow that environment pretty much overnight? Take a business that last year in the UK in February may have had, say, 300 staff working from an office, and the UK went into lockdown in March, I think it was. How would we deal with that? The irony being that some of the situations that are going on in the world at the moment with the lockdowns and people being asked to stay at home, they have impacts on services like this. So the 2020 test is something that's quite useful here. Consider how how it would fare if it had to scale quickly, and will we be in a place to support it. Talk about deployment options as well. This is the 7th of the 8 areas. So deployment methods, these are going to vary massively from organization to organization. I think this is something where you need to consider how that will change if you grow. So deploying machines manually might work today, but will that work if the organization grows massively? Do we need to look at infrastructure as code? Perhaps we need to look at Terraform. Perhaps we look at a third-party product like Nerdio, for example. Again, we come on then to infrastructure as code and DevOps. Are we in a position to make a change and go to that style of operation? It might provide rapid growth and scaling opportunities for us moving forward. A lot of those around the first two, deployment method and infrastructure as code and DevOps, are likely to be organizational questions. I know sort of as people who are used to working with technology, we're quite keen on new things. We like to play with shiny new toys, and these kind of new methodologies are often quite interesting to us, but sometimes the business needs to change with that, and that's sometimes a difficult thing for businesses to swallow. So again, something to consider if you are looking at moving forward. I think as well, image management is really important around deployment. We touched on some of the patching options in the previous sections, but just down to simple questions. If we update an image, how do we manage that, and how do we replicate it? what's our test plan? How do we back those images up? How do we make sure that our existing patching tools will work with that? We've got options like the image builder service. If you're familiar with Packer as well, you'll take to that quickly. But it's just important to consider, how that will work moving forward. Things around image management often come back to process as well. So ensuring you've got a really strong and well documented process for managing those images is really quite key. An important consideration here. Images on session hosts, do we have a patching tool that we could deploy? What happens if we need to push an app out to a large number of machines and we don't have an image that we can push out centrally, or we can spin new machines up from? Those are the kind of questions that are going to come up when things start to grow and scale. I think you couldn't mention deployment options as well without mentioning third-party tools. So there's some really great options out there for ongoing management and enhancement. Again, Nerdio, I'm sure Neil will be happy to talk to us about that at some point. Worth evaluating and looking into. If you're a business considering Windows Virtual Desktop at scale, or Windows Virtual Desktop full stop, it's worth just looking at those options and seeing if they are going to make life easier for you, and just seeing what they can do for you. Everybody's favorite topic, so business continuity and DR. So again, this comes down to just making sure that we've covered all of the bases. When we're designing for scale and growth, this is just an area that we can't ignore, basically, as well as ensuring all of our end users have access to business critical resources. We need to consider things like backups. Do we have any data in the environment that we have to make sure we retain for legal purposes? Unlikely that would come up with Windows Virtual Desktop, but it might come up as a question around an application that somebody is going to use Windows Virtual Desktop to access, for example. So the kind of areas we're going to consider here are around local resiliency. So we're going to use availability sets, zones, and again, this goes beyond just thinking, okay, great, we'll place all our session hosts in an availability set. Brilliant, I've done it, sorted. Think of those supporting services as well, and think of how they'll be protected. Again, regional resiliency. So you might want regional host pools, and have one ready to go as a DR. Again, one of the areas that sometimes gets overlooked if you are designing business continuity and DR into an environment like this is those supporting services. So down to basics like profile management, applications you're going to access. It's considerations about how those will be protected, from a regional perspective as well. Geographic's really important as well. Natural disasters, albeit rare, they do happen. Again, Experience Estimator can help you choose an alternate region, and just it's worth spending time looking at your options, and plan for the worst, hope for the best, and just make sure you've covered all the bases. DR plan as well is a really important step. So it's important to ensure that you A, have a plan, and B, test it regularly, and then C, make sure it works. And one of the real benefits of the power, the public cloud Microsoft Azure brings to us is those things are very, very easy to test. They're very, very easy to trial. And you can, for example, say, well, we've got this test plan. We're going to have a development and testing subscription in, say, 2 geographic regions, and we're going to do a full test. It facilitates that. It facilitates things that would be more difficult to test in a traditional on-premises environment, for example. Again, API limits, worth mentioning here as well. If your DR plan involves rapidly rolling out an image update to a very, very large number of VMs and then rebooting them or something like that, or you need to make very large numbers of API calls as part of some custom scripting or automation, again, just make sure you're not going to hit any of those limits, and that kind of comes down to testing that DR plan. Something to consider, you'd have to get to very large environments for that to happen, but it is worth the consideration. Again, kind of last point on this really, but backups are still critical in the public cloud. We need to ensure our core infrastructure elements and our images are protected. So if we've got a session host image that's protected and replicated to another region, that's great. We can get that back and running in a short space of time because we can create session hosts from that image. But what about if we can spin up session hosts, but we haven't protected any of our web servers that run our line of business application? We don't have a method for bringing those back up. Those are the sort of questions to be asking when considering scale there, really. So I know that was a little bit of a whistle-stop tour. Hopefully you haven't all fallen asleep. Just a quick recap. I think there's kind of 4 key points when you design for scale. Think wide. So think if you take a service, think about what happens if that service grows. So compute, for example, it's not just more VMs, more compute, more CPU, more memory, more disk space. What about if we need to run that across more regions? What about if we need to run it in different geographies? What about if we need to support more users? It's those kind of questions for when you're thinking about how wide a service may need to grow. Long term is really important as well. So design everything with the assumption that the service will run for a long time, and plan and assume that that service may need to grow over time, you know, by designing in space, giving it room to grow, putting in options for making changes in the future, even down to really silly things like, for example, let's say you need to run 250 one-to-one Windows 10 VDI machines. Well, it may seem easy to just pop those in a VNet that perhaps only has a very small address allocation available and peer that to a shared services VNet, for example. But long term, that may not be a good choice, because supposing that needs to grow, well, you're then looking at perhaps changing your addressing scheme, or increasing the size of that network by changing its addressing its subnet mask, for example, you know, and those things are going to be much more challenging than if you had a virtual network, for example, that had a spare subnet within it in case you needed to grow, even down to really simple things like that. And that ties in nicely to the third point, which is assume and plan for growth. I think if you assume that things will grow, that will help you plan. So where you might be designing to accommodate 20 virtual machines, 20 users, 2 regions, plan for what would happen if that becomes, you know, 40 virtual machines, 40 users, 4 regions, or 400 virtual machines, 400 users and 40 regions, or, you know, whatever. Just have a think about how that will change if you do need to grow. And if you put in options for growth, it will become easier moving forward. The fourth point really is refer to the cloud adoption framework. There's a huge number of tools, various bits of documentation, methodologies. There's also examples of landing zones that you can take in there, different deployment options. There's a real sort of wealth of information, and it's an area that's kind of very, I think subjective is a fair thing to say. You know, there's going to be the right way for one business, which will be the wrong way for another, and vice versa. So it's well worth having a look at that and just spending some time reading it and looking at all of those resources, just to help you plan that journey. 2 resource slides. I won't spend any time on those because they get shared afterwards. But yeah, these are all kind of things that are well worth a look. One on landing zones, one on scale. I hope you haven't fallen asleep, and yeah, please do feel free to follow me on Twitter. And thanks very much.
Thank you very much for that, Jake. That was certainly very interesting, and I hope it gives a lot of people things to think about when they're doing our next WV deployments. One thing which I couldn't help thinking when you were going through all those things is obviously when the pandemic hit, how many of those deployments that are out there today have just been rushed out without thinking about that kind of stuff. I'd imagine a lot of companies are currently revisiting their deployments, sort of to look at stuff like that. Are you seeing that out there? Are you seeing that kind of stuff?
A little bit of that, yeah. It's certainly an interesting one, because I think 2020, the year it was, I think there's probably been a lot of kind of knee-jerk scaling,
Yeah,
which is a strange
exactly.
phrase to be saying, but you know, sort of there'll have been a lot of you know, IT managers that potentially sort of got the call on a Friday. By the way, we need to double our remote working capacity, and we need to do it by Monday. So there will have been a lot of kind of very rapid ad hoc scaling. So yeah, it will be interesting.
Definitely good. As Jake mentioned, I'll be sharing all the slides, so I'll send the link out after the meeting. So any questions for Jake before we move on to our next presentation? Nope. Okay. Ryan, are you there?
I am indeed. So,
good. So Ryan's going to talk to us all about Parallels RAS version 18 and how it can help you with your Windows Virtual Desktop environment.
Well, we're going to talk about WVD hour with a little bit of RAS.
Okay.
We'll go the way around if that's all right.
Good.
Let me just share my screen and then we'll crack on if that's all right. That's if I share it properly. That's the first test. Here's one I made earlier. Is that shared properly?
Yep, I can see that.
A bit of a... Cool. All right. So, yeah, so today we're just going to talk about Parallels RAS. If you're not familiar with Parallels RAS, you may be familiar a long time ago, X2, which was this kind of like first version of like a VDI management tool, which some kind of industry veterans worked on back in the day, like CROD and so on. So Parallels RAS, I started using Parallels RAS on version 15. And the reason why I started using version 15 was that RDS on enterprise scale was a bit of a problematic challenge with the connection brokers. We came across significant issues with the connection brokers, black screening and deafing, locking sessions, locking the ability to actually provision brokerage services to users getting sessions. So it couldn't continue because we had a number of customers frustrated. They didn't want to go down the other vendors' route because of cost. They wanted to find a way of using native RDS services with a nice, simple management platform. And there comes Parallels, which offers various things, which we'll run through shortly. And the other challenge people had was the problem of having to have all of these third-party components to, print and scanning and you name it, all these things you've got to add on to kind of make the solution work. And it kind of comes with a lot of things out of the box, as you'll find out. So before we get started, if you're not aware of who I am, so my name is Ryan Mangan. I've been around for some time, specifically around remote desktop services and Microsoft technology for the last 10 years, blogging and things about it. Produced a few books and maybe some more in the future. And work for Appcure, which is an application packaging, application migration organization where we're focusing on getting applications off older operating systems onto Windows Virtual Desktop. So that's kind of a bit about me. And just also with the announcement of AZ140, I don't know, I wasn't allowed to say anything before, but I was actually involved in designing that exam. I don't know the questions before anybody starts asking me because I didn't do the questions. I just helped with the structure of that. So if anybody does have concerns or questions regarding content in the sense of what to look at, there might be some stuff coming out from me, and I'm more than happy to help in pointing people in directions for certain areas of content. And that kind of summarizes that. So before we get into Parallels RAS 18 and what it does with Windows Virtual Desktop, I thought it was best just to steal Parallels slides and just talk about, and these are obviously official sources, so like buffer.com and VDI Like a Pro and then SC Magazine. So remote working, so a lot of people who have been remote working before the pandemic and moving forward, 99% of them want to continue doing that. They find it much better for the lifestyle. I know, Neil, you touched on this before, that you get more done, you have more interaction with home, and I'm the same. So, I think previous conversations we've had, Neil, you said that. And then from some of the information gathered as well from Video Pro, 26% adoption on Windows Virtual Desktop. And then obviously data security, we all know that is not a dirty word. And obviously there's been significant impact to various organisations throughout the last couple of years, including WannaCry, which decided to take out the UK's NHS. So then we look at digital transformation challenges and opportunity. So as we move into this next industrial revolution, as we'll call it for now, where we're moving towards more technology. We've already got children, but using mobile phones at dinner table. We're having to take off and put them in a box or ignore them. We've got obviously the need to kind of have electronic autonomous cars, people warming the cars up on the mobile phones before they get them in the morning. We're moving towards that more digital ecosystem every day. We are seeing this transition slowly. Maybe some people don't realize it, but before you know it, you're using digital for absolutely most things. And some people will get excited. They may have a smart washing machine or a smart fridge. I am yet to enjoy that. I prefer to have a cave. So Windows Virtual Desktop adoption, as we know, that's been the most kind of popular topic of the last year. And some of the investments Microsoft have made are fantastic. And as it keeps growing and growing, and week by week, they keep adding more. So thanks to Microsoft and the Black Belts and everybody else who have been working on that. And then going on to data security, PCI DSS, HIPAA, and GDPR. And furthermore, it's becoming a norm to have ISO 27001 for an organization. So most people now expect the majority of organizations to have that sort of baseline credentials to operate in industry. And these are the sort of things we're seeing which need to be applied into technology. Okay, so that brings me on to Parallels RAS. And I think I've got flashing things going on here, so there's a loop. Are they moving or not? Should these slides be advancing?
The slides aren't advancing. Should they be?
Not
Or
at all. They
no?
should be, but they're not. How dare they? Oh, what about now? Are they advancing now?
Yep.
Ah, right. Well, you don't need to see a picture of me. It's scary. Digital transformation, not really an amazing picture, but now you can see it. And then we'll just start where we mean to go on. Okay. And then that's what I was talking about, the 3 different points here where we've got the remote working, Windows Virtual Desktop adoption, and data security. And that was just a test to make sure you're all awake. Okay. So Parallels RAS released version 18 in December. Some of the new core features is a unified Windows Virtual Desktop integration. So as we all know, not everybody has moved on to Windows Virtual Desktop as of yet. There's still quite a fair crack to go if everybody does decide to go down that route in the first place. So Parallels have kind of built what we call it, the ability to offer even, would we dare call it, multi-cloud from a desktop perspective. They've essentially allowed you to integrate and configure Windows Virtual Desktop through their interface. Their interface, which I'll show you in due course, is fairly straightforward. But you know, anybody who's been using RDS and moving on to Parallels, they've given you the stepping stone to slowly transition to new technology or hybrid or enable. So one of the things I've seen recently is some applications will not run on server 19. Doesn't matter what you try and do, they will not work. But for some strange reason, they'll run on Windows 10 64-bit. So to deliver them applications, would you want to have persistent individual desktops for all them applications, or would it be better to link a hybrid configuration with Windows Virtual Desktop and use remote app capabilities? And the answer would be remote app sounds like a good idea because we're going to save money using multi-session Windows 10, right? So that's obviously one example. Some other kind of the interesting things they brought out is the UX evaluator again, which I'll quickly kind of run through, where you're able to see a lot more of the user's session, the user's experience, and that, you know, what's the user experiencing. So for a long time we've had, you know, let's say we've got a customer in Milan and their internet is playing up, and because we're sat in sunny London in the concrete jungle, we're not seeing them issues. We're not seeing any, but there's an issue clearly there because they've got that problem. This will help us further identify what that challenge could be. FS Logic Profile Containers integration. Obviously, that's a big thing that has really helped us move forward in the VDI kind of journey. That can be configured throughout the UI, and again, we'll cover that. You've got things like RDSH and VDI distribution from local storage, automatic image optimization. So rather than running scripts and PowerShell and API calls to fancy systems, it's all built into the UI and you can quickly run that. And there's also a management portal. I'm not going to go into nth degree of all the other bits, but have a quick glare at what's on the screen. And obviously, if you want more information, you can get this information from Parallels or contact me after this. Okay, so unified Windows Virtual Desktop integration. So Parallels are not trying to reinvent the wheel, which is always a good thing. They're not trying to compete, they're actually trying to enhance. So Parallels, what they've done is they basically enabled you to, as an additional offering to the current platform, add the ability to deliver Windows Virtual Desktop, configure it, and roll out templates and so on and so forth, which we'll cover. Again, this is really useful for the people who want to do multi-session and also have the hybrid. So if you've already got you know, a cost of ownership on existing infrastructure, you've got a lot of tin left and you want to use that up, the hybrid approach might be the first stepping stone for you to kind of embark on the WVD kind of journey. Not everybody goes straight to cloud, right? As we're all finding out. Some of the kind of things they talk about simplify and enhance, and I'll kind of look at it from a technical perspective because this is very, in my opinion, marketing, and we're all technical. Hopefully most of us are all technical. We can understand that. One of the big things I found from Parallels RAS is the AI session pre-launch. This is pretty good because it can anticipate when people log on, so it can prepare sessions for people for ready for they can log on. And this was released, I believe, was it version 17, if I remember rightly, and there was a massive further adoption for that. And I think in 2019, when they did the VDI like a pro survey, there was an increase of 6% in the adoption of Parallels RAS because of some of the kind of features like AI-based session pre-launch. And then obviously the kind of unified Windows Virtual Desktop experience is taking the FS logic, the optimizing the hosts. All of this is kind of rammed into a kind of single UI, which makes it nice and easy just to crack on. From an admin perspective, if you're not just doing WVD the same day, you might have other jobs. You might even not be just solely on end user computing. You might be spinning up Kubernetes clusters all day. Then this might be an option to kind of, manage WVD on the fly. So if we then take a look at the high-level overview, so the kind of core components of Parallels RAS is you have things like a publishing agent, which is like the broker service, and you have the RAS console, and then you have your VDI, your Active Directory, and then your Parallels client, as you can see at the bottom, as is on the bottom there. And this can be installed on Azure natively, AWS, and other platforms. And as you can see now, the publishing agent nicely connects into the Microsoft managed Azure services for Windows Virtual Desktop. And it enables you to obviously have this multi-session Windows Desktop experience, as well as using existing RDS type remote app capabilities. And then we have some kind of use cases which we've already covered. So desktop as a service might be an MSP kind of play. It might be that you're still using Windows 7 on premises. You might want to use the kind of on-premise Windows 7 license rather than paying compute because you've got existing tin and so on and so forth. There's various different things. Only you will know how it will fit best for your organization or your customer's organization. And again, there's a big point of maintaining legacy applications. Personally, my opinion of legacy applications, there's no such thing. There's applications on old operating systems and there's applications on new. Legacy is just a bit of a kind of hoax in my view, but that's my opinion and everybody's got one of them. So FS Logic's profile container integration, nice and simple. We're looking at a form. And what we do simply is set the location of the profile disks as you would expect either on registry, group policy, fill out the details, select the share and done, off you go. And then that will go ahead and do all of the magic for you. There's nothing complicated here. Parallels RAS takes care of that. That can be on premise, that could be on Azure, that could be on other cloud platforms. And then just diving into a little bit more detail here, we've got the advanced settings for that. So as you can see, number of locked BHT, delayed between, all of that kind of stuff, enable cache mode for Outlook. All of this is kind of rammed into this nice simple UI for you to kind of just click and play rather than plug and play. And then we've got the UX and the advanced session details. So these are the 5 kind of steps really. So number 1, the UX evaluator is triggered from the client. The RAS shell receives the query, and then the RAS shell simulates the user action and waits for an update. And then the RAS shell sends a reply back to the client and receives and calculates the time it's taken. So this allows you, and this is not just on Windows Virtual Desktop. This is basically on, it could be multi-cloud. It could be on premise. It could be just using existing tin. It could be whatever you want, but this can be used across the board. So you can have this unified user experience monitoring capability for all of your different environments and different sites. And just going into some of the advanced session details in there, you can see things like user logged on, ID, logon times, the things which we can look at, and we'll dive into detail a bit, but there's just a bit of information on the setup and connection details. And again, log on duration and some of the bits there, what's going on. Again, I'm not going to bore you too much with this because I'll show you some of the settings in due course. Okay, so what you can do as well is you can customize the monitoring experience as well. So the UX evaluator allows you to basically do some advanced settings and configuration. So you can look at things like, latency, bandwidth in, bandwidth out, incoming data, outgoing data, and so on and so forth, and kind of flag what's critical and what's acceptable. So if you know there's a specific latency on that side of a user, you can set the expectation for a experience for that, let's say that site or that building, that country, whatever you want to mark it as. and then you can basically report back and gather that monitoring information. So there's a high level of analytics going into this. There's a lot of information which the IT admins are getting back, which is quite useful when diagnosing end user experience issues. And then moving on to kind of what's quite nice now, rather than having to run scripts and things, is they've taken 130 optimizations and split them into 11 categories and put them into the UI. And this can be a part of the rollout provision, which I'll show you shortly, which allows you to basically optimize your image as it's being deployed. So you can template and then deploy that out into a Windows Virtual Desktop host pool. And then basically all that can be covered. And some of the benefits, as we already know with optimization, is condensing, getting more people onto a single box, faster boot time logons and cloning speeds, and so on and so forth. And then obviously there's things like RDSH, VDI distribution, which in this case is not too interesting for us because we're more focused about Windows Virtual Desktop. But obviously just to kind of cover into that, as you can see, you can spin out template copies fairly quickly and clone them out. So management. So yeah, people who complain, oh, the UI is a bit, a bit old. I get this a lot. First version of AppCure was very was old, but it worked. The reason why it was old is we had to go back to Windows 98. But same with Parallels. Parallels have worked very hard over the last couple of versions to build out a management portal. And as you can see here, they've got something which is coming on very nicely. There's kind of a bit of a mobile view there and a plain view, and we're going to run through this quickly. But as you can see, you've got a nice UI there to kind of manage it rather than using the client form if you don't want to. And just in more kind of detail, as you can see there, it kind of gives you an idea of some of the things you will be configuring and setting up in that UI. Publishing applications in here, so you can have a look at filters, permissions, SSIDs, any kind of parameters you need to set, icon changes, as you would expect, but just now in a web UI. And then this is one I really do like, is the accelerated file retrieval. So copying through RDP file enumeration is problematic, crashes and causes problems sometimes. So Parallels have, and I think this is from customer feedback over the years, is they've introduced what we call a kernel-based driver to achieve kind of like a native RDP, to improve really the native RDP enumeration, which improves the speed of copying files across even other port networks, so the stability. So it's a bit like, you look at the old kind of WAN optimization, but this is built into the products directly. And this is kind of quite useful when you're using maybe a hybrid of RDS and Windows Virtual Desktop. And then that kind of brings on to just kind of going to the technical bit now. So I do apologize, paint by numbers, PowerShell, kind of sketch of belt feeding you of slides. What we're going to do now is just whiz over some demos. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you some videos, and then we'll dive into an actual real life demo, just for stability reasons. So we'll go into this one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go into the UI and I'm going to set up a kind of integration into, oh, my bad. Keep doing that. No. And then PowerPoint was the fight. Ah, that's why. Right, go again. Apologies. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is we're going to go into and create a connection into Windows Virtual Desktop. No, we're in the really wrong screen here. That's what happens when you have all these things open at once. Too many screens, Neil. That's the problem when you build a new home office. Take note of that one.
You should know, don't do live demos.
Well, that's not live, and I can't even do a video demo. I'm the opposite of Jim Moyle. Anyway, we'll fix it in a second when I finish having a fight, or I'll just throw my computer out the window. Right, okay, so So what we're going to do is we're going to basically add Windows Virtual Desktop into the kind of cluster. So as you can see, there's nothing there at the moment. There's nothing shown. It's going to run through all of the bits and bats, and then it's going to go and add Windows Virtual Desktop into the RAS kind of console. So first of all, it's just showing you this is just RDS working. So there you go. You see RDS. No Windows Virtual Desktop at the moment. Establishing a connection into server 16 or 19. Same capabilities as well. So, and we'll briefly cover it. You can provision things like app V, even though it's on its way out. You can provision web folders and so on and so forth. But we'll cover that in a minute once we get through the video. And I'll do an actual real dive into the fun stuff. Okay, so first thing you need to do is you need to basically download the WVD agent and bootloader. You can click on the download button, and then that'll do that for you. And then you can set the client features and things. So in here, we're adding the desktop service provider, so the Windows Virtual Desktop provider in this case. All you need is your tenant ID, your subscription, your application ID, and your application key. And obviously, it's very similar to any other. If you're using the WVD admin and things like that, you still need to do the same thing. It's just enabling you access into that tenant. And as you can see here, he's just filling out his details. The only reason I'm showing you this is I've already done it and I don't want to kind of have a fight again with it. And once this is done, we'll get on to the real stuff. Okay, so that's established the provider and that's all set up. And then what will happen is it'll ask you to then basically create a workspace in Windows Virtual Desktop or use an existing one, as you can see here. So this will then go and call back to the Azure portal with the APIs and do all the provisioning for you without you having to do anything else. So that'll take care of it through the Parallels UI. Obviously, this is a bit slow, so you just have to bear with it, and then once you get on the real stuff. And then obviously it goes into creating a host pool, but I'm not going to bore you with that because that's what we're going to cover next. So what I'll do now is I'll just stop sharing that session and share my server 19 screen and drop that into here. And can everybody see that?
Yep, we can.
Perfect. Cool. Right. So what we've got here is we've obviously got the Parallels RAS UI. It's been the same with a few enhancements since the version 15.16. What I've done is I've connected a provider. So I'm connected to my blog and we're good to go with Windows Virtual Desktop. So I'm now connected into my WVD environment. And what I've done is I've deployed a Ryan test workspace. And I've also deployed the host pool. And then within the host pool, I've got 2 session hosts, and I've also got a template to provision more. And what I do have as well in the background is some connections. So before I do anything else, I'll show you the UX tool where I'll just go show information. And what I've got in here, see if I can zoom this in because I bet it's not as great on your screen as it is in mine, but it will let me. So what you can see here is obviously, if I just minimize that a minute and just open that. is you can see some of the kind of stats here. So incoming data, outgoing data, resolution, color, bandwidth usage, and then the kind of latency and log on issues you've got with that. So I'm just going to log this chap off. That one's gone. And then go back to the host. So I've got 2 hosts in here at the moment. There's things like, you know, you can check age and do logging, and there's a various number of tools in there. And you can also do enable and disable logoffs, and you can show any sessions associated to that host itself. What we've got as well is we've got templates. So if we want to kind of configure a template, we can go in here and set some of the settings, how many set premium, network details, disk, the size in Azure, and then if you want to use RAS prep, which is faster than sysprep, you can use that. And then you can do things like optimize, manual, choose what you want. So the image optimizations here, as you can see. You can do cleanup. So what I want to do then is I'm going to go back to host now and just add a host. I'm just going to add one. So that'll go forth now and spin up a host in its own leisure. And then what I can do as well as in the host pool is I can then add another, create a new host pool. So in this case, I'm just going to do 2222. Go through the wizard. You've got things like number of sessions, load balancer, breadth and depth. You can do different types of publishing. So in this case, we're doing desktop. And it's going to be pulled multi-session. You can do validation environment as well, especially if you're using preview. And you can pull from a template or use standalone. What we've done is, here's one we made earlier. You can use an existing template or create a new one. You can enable auto scale as well. So everything's for you in there. And then you've got auto scale settings. So if you just need to do minimum, maximum hosts, percentage, a threshold to work upon, you can obviously configure all this through this nice little wizard. And then you can assign groups and users in here. In this case, I'm just going to do test user. And obviously, you'll probably notice that's just help if I can type. And then in here, what you can do, as you're told, you can basically set cloud cache or SMB location, VHD, VHDX, dynamic or full, disk size, and any additional settings you want for FS Logic profile containers, all through the same wizard. In this case, I'm not going to do that because I'm just flying through a demo, click finish. And what that's going to do now is that's going to go and spin up a host pool and another session host for me in its own leisure. And that is doing that spin in the background. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go and open the session again while that's doing that. And then what we should see in a minute. So that's obviously busy deploying. I'm just waiting for this to kind of play ball. Anyway, while we're waiting for that, so what you can do as well is when you're first setting up with the Windows Virtual Desktop, you go down here to features under settings. So you go into the farm, go into settings, and then go into the features. You'll note there's 2 sections. There's one for Windows Virtual Desktop at the bottom, and there's FS Logic at the top. What's cool as well is you can actually set up installation online, so you can pull it directly from the online feed, which you can detect and update the new, or you can push it from the RAS and install from a network location. So essentially, it kind of takes care of some of that kind of pain in terms of deploying. And the same again, you can download the agent and bootloader, and you've got a choice of standard, advanced with fallback as well. And as you can see, that's using the current version. Once this is enabled, by the way, then it appears here. Otherwise, it doesn't appear. And you can have many work groups and host pools, as you know, without any issues. So going back to here. And what we can do as well, template creation, we'll do that here. So we'll do a new multi-session template. Use Azure Gallery. I'm just going to select this and give it a username and password like you would do for Azure. And then there's things like, you know, horsepower on state after preparation. You can delete unused hosts. There's a cleanup process you can put in there, and you can do the buffer settings as well. In this case, I'm just going to go on the fly. Then you can select a resource group. You can select a size. And as you can see, because this template is in the US, it's not come up with any settings. So change that to UK South. Select the resource group. And in here, you can basically do optimizations as well. So you can do manual as well if you want to kind of do custom scripts too. There's all sorts of things you can do, or you can enable that. And then obviously in here, you just need to put passwords in. Oh, that's a different one. And then what I'll do is that'll go away and create the template as well. It's still busy building. So that's just kind of a real high level kind of input into the WVD bit. But obviously other things you can do as well is like printing. So like universal printing is built into this. There's universal scanning. There's policies as well. So we can do things like, you know, various different, you know, video capture, all of that. The RDP policies and stuff in there can be added into this. The other thing as well is session pre-launch, which I was telling you about. So you can do machine learning and obviously set certain things in to exclude dates and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to play with in here. Monitoring, you can build out the monitoring and stuff in there. Device management as well. So specific devices, you can, you know, get information from that device. And you can also control on some devices the ability to reboot, log off, and so on and so forth on the actual physical device, which is connecting into the client. And then obviously what you can also do is provision out various different things. So for example, you can provision out V. We can then do a desktop. And you've got the option of obviously Windows Virtual Desktop and Session Host. And you've also got remote apps. So if you're already using, like I said, an on-premise RDS and you're not wanting to kind of take the jump, you can basically have a hybrid approach and deliver your applications today with the applications via Windows Virtual Desktop. And you can do the pre-launch thing as well with it. So it's all built into there. There's lots of features with Windows, with the Parallels RAS version 18 for Windows Virtual Desktop, which you can just add. And this kind of reduces the number of kind of things you need to kind of buy on your bucket list to make happen. You could even roll out the Linux version of the client as well if you wanted. And then obviously that kind of just summarizes the bits we've been doing. And obviously I've got a few failures because I've been trying to. That's actually quite good, really. So what you can do is you can do retry last steps. So you can repair as well. And what you can do as well is you can actually recreate if there's a problem with something, and you can go ahead and do that. And that kind of just summarizes what I wanted to kind of show you today.
Okay, awesome. Is that the end, or have you got some more to show? Is that it?
I mean, I could do, but I thought just give you a dive into, because we can go on all day, can't we? I've got other things, but to be fair, that was just kind of a high level, just A, covering some of the kind of bits it can do, and B, obviously, you know, it's not the end of the world if you've already got, you know, on premise. You can move to Windows Virtual Desktop for certain things like legacy applications, and you can start the journey now, is the message really. And the other big point as well, which Christian has mentioned in the back, is, you know, one of the challenges a lot of people have is like the shadowing and the session management, the ability to kind of do pre-session launch. There's a lot of features, including, like I covered, the accelerated file retrieval, which isn't really there natively, and some of the other features can't offer to date. But obviously this is a matured product because it's been around for so long. So if you've already got Parallels RAS, that's the first thing you can obviously add benefit by using Windows 10 multi-session on WVD. And also, if you want to kind of consolidate functions and features from third parties, you can bring it all under a Parallels RAS type. Also, for those who want to achieve multi-cloud, as we'll call it, there is nothing stopping you having, you know, cross-vendor cloud platforms delivering various aspects from applications to Windows 10 multi-session.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much for that. Has anybody got any questions that you want to ask Ryan? No? Okay. Has anyone got any questions which you want to ask in general about Windows Virtual Desktop? This is your chance to ask. Nope, you've all had enough of listening to us rambling on. Okay, good. Well, if we haven't got anything else, then I will end the sessions. As per usual, I will send out the links. Do you want me to share your slide, Ryan? If you want me to, just email it over to me and I'll send it out. Also, the video will be uploaded to YouTube probably tomorrow or over the weekend sometime. So if any of you missed it, you can catch up or share it with whoever you want to share it with or anything like that. So thanks for all coming. It's been a great evening. So next month we have Scott Seddon, who will be talking about printing, which is always a sort of a hot topic. We're going to have Baz Van Cam on talking about Nerdio. So I will speak to you all next month, and if you need anything, just reach out. If you want to present, as we said earlier, please let us know, and we can fit you in. Okay. I'll let you all have your evening back.
Cheers, everyone. See ya.
Thanks. Bye-bye.